Hello, here we are doing another lesson, and this is directly building on what you did yesterday. So I had asked you to go through chapter 7 and do some annotations, trying to think about themes, topics that emerge for you. So trying to be a little bit more purposeful in your annotation. So I want to build on that work and see if we can have a better understanding of the whole thematic topic idea because people were having a hard time answering that. So I'm going to walk you through my annotations and see if by modeling the process that it helps you understand how to do it yourself, and we'll see how that works. So really the goal when you're doing this is you're taking another look at the chapter, but you're really just skimming for what stood out to you. So that's what I'm going to do. So I had highlighted what he'll look like in the coffin and failing here. And then I had also highlighted, I suddenly really realized that Chris is white, just like 115. And then I'm going to quickly look over my notes that I made, and I said the repetition of this phrase, what he'll look like in the coffin, emphasizes Star's state of mind and the injustice of Khalil's young life ending. And then I mentioned yesterday too that the word failing seemed like an interesting choice for Angie Thomas to use in this situation. Failing and not thinking about it, just that idea of failing. It suggests that she's feeling a sense of responsibility or that somehow she had something to do with this situation. And then the other, let me go back. I think I scrolled ahead. I didn't mean to. This other one, I suddenly really realized that Chris is white, just like 115. That is a really big moment when Star, I mean, obviously she knows Chris is white, but that she's associating Chris with a, maybe bigger problem in white culture and a sense that she's betraying her community in Garden Heights, and that is really striking a chord with her. So I'm going to go to the next slide now. And here I highlighted, but am I betraying who I am by dating him? This gets to this inner conflict about Chris being white once again. And she's having some feelings about that she doesn't really know how to untangle. To me, that's starting to really suggest something that, I guess starting isn't the right word here. It's suggesting something that has emerged in earlier chapters right away. The idea of that dueling identity or double consciousness that Star is struggling with. She has her Garden Heights version, and then she has this Williamson Star. And this is really coming into the forefront of her mind in this situation. The other annotation is when she's playing, or she's sitting with her friend Haley, and they're talking about kind of just about the game. And there's a moment when Star realizes how somewhat trivial some of these worries are that her white friends have. And even this whole section afterwards, when they're like referring to High School Musical and like that, to me, I don't know, that's like the epitome of like white ridiculousness. And the fact that they're kind of in that moment, to me, emphasizes it. So the next page here, I highlighted the reference to Emmett Till. And if you don't know about that story of Emmett Till, it's tragic. And he was a young black boy who whistled supposedly at a white woman in a store, and they brutally murdered him. And this, I want to say it was like the 50th year anniversary was last year, and there was a lot more publicity about it. And so she's referring to this when she posted a picture of Emmett Till, because his mother at his funeral, she had an open casket, and she did that very purposefully to show how brutally he had been murdered. And it was gruesome. And she was doing it to make a point that this was an unbelievable case of injustice, and she wanted the world to see it, and the world did see it, and there was a huge response and sort of uprising about it. Side note, the woman and or family of the woman he supposedly whistled at, not too long ago admitted that she's not even sure he whistled at her. So it just even adds more tragedy to the situation. So the other thing I annotated is a leader among you and your friends, and it's not you. So this is when Star's realizing that her friend Haley is the leader of their trio, and she's not really sure how that happened. And to me, that maybe suggests a little bit of like sometimes the power struggles that happen in friend groups, and it's not lost here that Haley is the white girl, and she, as we see on the next page, is racist. I highlighted when she says to Star, "Pretend the ball is some fried chicken, bet you'll stay on it then." And you can see Star's response, understandably, and she later says, "I can't believe she said she couldn't have no way." So that certainly shines a light on the prejudice, racist, really deeply seated attitudes and narratives that white people have about Black people. And it's staying Star, and it's understandable that it would. So on the next slide, I highlighted the drug dealer. That's how they see him. So this is when Haley and Maya are asking Star if she knows or if she knew Khalil. And in that instance, I think, in my notes, I said that it's reducing Khalil to this label that fits a larger racist narrative about young Black men. And this is something that I think that Angie Thomas is very deliberately including in this story, because this happens in reality, unfortunately, all the time. And you look at headlines, and I've even seen it with regard to things that have happened locally. Those kinds of labels end up describing people, and it reduces them, it reduces their humanity. And it's an awful thing to deal with, to see, and it obviously bothers Star that she's thinking that somehow that justifies the murder. That is what she's can't wrap her head around. But then she goes on to deny that she knows. I don't know that Khalil, she says, and then it's a betrayal worse than dating a white boy. And she says later, but I had to do what I had to. And again, that gets at these dueling identities that Star is trying to navigate, and it's a terrible position that she's in. A couple more pages here. So it's a continuation of that. They're kind of poking at her to see why she's so upset, and they bring up Natasha, her friend that she saw killed, and she says, hell do I deserve them? So she's questioning the deserving aspect, which in my notes I say the question of deserving, and later in the other highlighted note where she says, what's worse than being the angry black girl, the weak black girl? Um, she's she's feeling bad because she cried, and that suggests, I think we talked about that in class at one point, this idea that emotion um, is somehow a sign of weakness, and it certainly isn't. But Star is feeling like this sort of sense that she isn't supposed to show her feelings. So there's this deep conflict that's emerging within Star here in this chapter. Um, this I highlighted only because it again emphasizes the kind of dual world that she's in. So she talks about this brand new mini mall that's hipster heaven, full of stores you'd never find in Garden Heights. So that's just a two worlds kind of note. And then later, after she has Uncle Carlos pick her up from school, she needed to leave, and her mother says, "Did something happen?" And she says, "No." So there's a sense too that Star can't even really be truthful with her mom, and that's not something we've really seen a lot yet. But it suggests that this whole conflict within her is going really deep. In this one, I just highlighted this one line. I hadn't seen him in months before the party, and this is when she's really debating whether she should go to Khalil's funeral, which, of course, it seems so obvious that the expectation would be that she would be there, but there's maybe a sense of guilt that she hadn't seen him, hadn't kept up on their friendship as much as in hindsight she wished she had. But I think it also reflects that terrible moment when she's going to see him in the coffin and have to face the loss of him and everything that entails. The last two, it's not that difficult, I say, he killed Khalil, and this is when she's sitting with her uncle still, and he's trying to say that this is a complicated situation, and she is saying it's not complicated. And she goes on to tell him that the officer had pointed the gun at her. And this isn't, I felt like I had even kind of lost track that happened. And when she said it, I was like, oh my God, he did do that. And it really emphasizes how he was in the wrong. I mean, he was in the wrong, but it just makes it that much more powerful. And I think in that moment, we also see that Uncle Carlos he's realizing that this white officer who was a colleague of his was in the wrong. So after I review all of my notes, I really think that idea of that dual identity becomes really clear. That Star is pulled between these two worlds, and she's got the primarily black, poor Garden Heights where she lives, and this wealthy, primarily white prep school she attends. And there's tension there where she's navigating these boundaries all the time between who she is as a person and who the outside white world sort of portrays her. And she really wants to resist those stereotypical narratives. And that has to, weigh very heavily on her. So to me, that would be the theme I would continue to look for and write about, this idea of dueling identities and double consciousness overlapping. And so that's what that would be my, I guess, interest here in exploring. And you may see something else. So you're going to do your own, review of your annotations, and that's going to land you in a place where you'll be able to write what your thinking is. And I'll show you that what I mean in a moment.